Michael. I'm the founder and director of Compost Club, and we intercept food waste to reduce emissions. We produce a living compost so that it's really regenerative, full of microbiology to restore soil. And we also educate people how they can compost themselves or how they can form their own groups and do a similar thing. Compost Club essentially runs as a membership sort of club. So people join as members, they get their food waste collected. We return a clean bucket each time to make it super convenient. And that is quite a diverse mixture of local residents from all sorts of different backgrounds, which is really nice. And some other local businesses as well. So often more kind of health food shops and that kind of thing. There's the cold pressed juice cafe that we take a lot from. And then we work with local community gardens as well. So kind of in demonstrating that closed loop, in every spring we bring compost back to the members, but about half of them elect to just donate that to a local community group, which is really nice. And we've had a hand in setting up a community group at a local football club, Lewes Football Club. So there's actually a little veg growing garden there, which we're kind of actively involved in running, and compost goes there to boost that, and that's starting to get going this year. Yeah, we educate people on composting. So we have groups come in to site and we give them a tour, give them the whole kind of soil food web talk, and talk about nutrient cycling and kind of the power that compost has to sequester carbon. If we can mix kind of composting really well with sort of permaculture and regenerative agriculture, it has massive potential to sequester carbon. So that is essentially what Compost Club does. I guess what makes us a social enterprise, I mean, we essentially run as a non-for-profit, and then if we ever do get to making any surplus, we're kind of invested and committed into using that to grow the project and basically scale it. And we're crowdfunding right now. We've got a few days left to kind of make this site that I'm at now optimal. We've got 2 other potential sites, like partners in waiting, who basically want us to do what we're doing there. And the kind of the vision is to kind of see compost clubs all over the place, everywhere where there are cities, so that we can have this nutrient cycling like nature does. So we can have the outside agriculture growing the food, sending that into the city. Compost clubs can capture any wasted food and turn that into soil food, green the inner city landscapes, and there'll be a massive surplus because we waste a lot of food, sadly. So then that can be exported back out to the agriculture. They can grow without a reliance on inorganic pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, producing a more nutrient dense food. And then that can just, that sort of cycle just coming in and out, and we're just capturing and cycling nutrients. And we sort of get rid of this lineal waste. So we've actually been able to sort of, from investing initially, and I've done this by myself for sort of well over a year, we've actually been able to bring somebody on board through the government Kickstart scheme. And that's part of what the crowdfunder's for, to be able to get us to a scale where the kind of the membership fees that we charge, which aren't huge, just cover all of that logistical work, so that we're kind of committed to doing this on a human scale, so that we don't even have electricity on site. It's all kind of, I like to say that it's kind of human powered, but it's actually microorganism powered. We just steward a process. So we've been able to take somebody on, and that would be a young person that would have been on something like universal credit. So they've been able to come on board and join the team. And we're hoping to do much more of that. So as we scale, to bring people on board and create green jobs rather than sort of mechanizing to make it more like profitable. The whole point of the company is to create green jobs rather than losing any jobs. And in the pursuit of regenerating soil and sequestering carbon emissions rather than pursuing profits. What was quite astounding would have been, we were asked to kind of produce sort of carbon calculations for what we were doing, and we went through the government and the RAP sort of figures for food waste and drink that goes to landfill, and it releases over 600 kilos, something like 628 kilos off the top of my head, of carbon equivalent emissions per ton. And so that will be things like methane, nitrous oxide, ammonium, and obviously carbon, but far worse things. And comparatively, if we aerobically compost it, it releases less than 9 kilos per ton, as 8 point something. So it's just astonishing. You know, I kind of, until that point, obviously I knew what we were doing was good, but to kind of be able to measure it, and that's just per ton, you know. So that was quite a kind of eye-opening thing for me personally, and just generally the kind of the support that comes from people. We've had, I did a really nice interview on Instagram just Friday, which is one of the reasons my voice is quite hoarse. I had quite a few community groups in for the day as well, and yeah, I did this interview with Una Chaplin, who's kind of does a lot of work with Indigenous communities and just really into composting, and again the power it has to kind of fix some of the issues that we're looking at ecologically. And so that was really quite exciting. I get now that COVID restrictions are gone, I'm being able to invite groups in and just do a lot more kind of, whether it's consultancy or whether it's just showing people around that are curious, just to be kind of spreading the message of the power of the microbes. And yeah, I call it sort of, I teach the way of the worm. Yeah, just engaging with people is really exciting, in the way that I'm doing right now with you, I guess. In my kind of entry into it was through growing. So for me, I was looking at sort of permaculture principles, and one of the key aspects of that, I mean, there's sort of people care aspect of it as well as the kind of earth care, and it's to kind of just have this holistic view on things. So I'm often saying to people, like, we tend to look at things here in isolation and we say, oh well, this thing's good, but you know, if you kind of zoom out a little bit, and I'm constantly saying zoom out a bit, because what's the impact of that thing after it's out of that view, and what was the impact of, say, the people or the resources before it came into that view. And so it's, for me, it's just about zooming out and looking at things as a whole, and just seeing it kind of woo, but for me, just everything, existence, the world, it's just this playing out of energy, and it's a very kind of, well, it's an enormously complex organism that's interconnected. Nothing happens in isolation. There is that what we're doing is the effect of some causation, and what we do will cause something else. And you know, even just in interactions with people, if we have a positive interaction, they're more likely to go off and have more positive interactions with the people that they encounter. And in the same way, if we're negative, they're more, you know, everything, you know, energy transfers, it doesn't disappear. So we can, you know, put our focus on being positive. And I guess for me, I have quite a kind of extreme, I guess, point of view on the business front, in that what I'm trying to do is demonstrate that you can be you can be viable economically, and not just sustainable, but regenerative ecologically. And I think if we can demonstrate that, and enough people can demonstrate that, then this kind of term that I think gets hidden behind of business as usual can actually be rebranded as destructive. You know, I think for me, sustainable is the least we have to do, and that is the least everybody should have to do, because that just means keeping things as they are, right? So for me, you know, keeping things as they are is one thing, and not making things worse. But we can be regenerative, and then we talk about like footprints, but actually if you're being regenerative, your footprint is, it's like your legacy, and you want to leave that behind. The more you do, the better it is, so you can have lived and lived well. So for me, like the bigger my footprint, the better. My advice to myself years ago will have been, find what lights you up. And what I mean by that, I was thinking it just this morning in turning the compost over there. You know, I'm working pretty physically, but it's where I get my energy. And I used to work, I was a tradesman before setting this company up, and it was what my work was what drained my energy. And if you can find what lights you up, you're getting energy from it in a really beautiful way. It's like a little pat on the back from the universe to sort of, you find something that's good, and it just feels good to do good. And that, I mean, I get a lot of feedback from people about my kind of being quite impassioned when I'm talking about what I do. And I used to be cripplingly shy, right up into my early 20s. And so I think it's when the ego comes out of it and I'm not talking about me and look at what I'm doing. It's the good that's being done that's coming through me. So I kind of don't really take much credit for it, really. It's just I found my kind of purpose, essentially, I think. And yeah, it's almost, and one of the lovely things in terms of business is any kind of knocks or anything that come along, it just ends up, because it's not felt as a personal thing, it's almost just like a fuel. So it just drives the thing on because you're just channeling, and you're just in a flow. I think, yeah, I mean, if that made any sense, I think that's my my advice. In terms of plans for the future, so where I am here right now, I'm actually in the middle of an industrial estate. There's an amazing property developer called Human Nature, and they've managed to get hold of this site, and they're ex-Greenpeace executives, and they used to do a lot of consultancy with property developers to make them more ecologically conscious in their design and their delivery of these developments. And you know, so much waste from the development sector, and coming from construction background, I know that firsthand. And they just happened to find me here in a little community garden just across from where I am now, doing this on a very small scale when I started it. And they're looking to just kind of to have an impact in that sector. They basically decided to set up their own development company and do things the way that they think they should be done. So they're reclaiming a lot of materials, they're sourcing things locally, they're growing, and they've sourced a lot of timber that's going to be used on the project. They're using things like hempcrete. It's just a kind of beautiful approach. And in kind of meeting in this place, there's talk now of potentially setting something up to compost for all of the households that are going to be built here, so that food waste doesn't need to be dealt with by a council and incinerated or go to landfill or something. It can be used, and there's going to be loads of green space and like an urban farm, and you know, we can be regenerating where we're doing it, which is really exciting. There's also a really amazing estate and garden and nursery that's kind of pretty close by, who are really into what I'm doing, and they want me to set up there as well. So it's just about just doing more, basically. So as I said earlier, I'm crowdfunding at the moment to kind of consolidate this site, and then the idea would be to get somebody on board who can manage this site, so that I can then set up another one. I'm meeting some local councillors here today, this afternoon, to talk with them about how we can maybe do something there. There's a group locally called the Brighton Home Food Partnership who've got funding for, I think, 10 community groups to have composting infrastructure, and then I can come on board and sort of teach those groups how to do that well and efficiently and make use of that compost. So just kind of expanding it as much as I can, and yeah, seeing compost clubs kind of pop up all over the place. If I can, I guess, to try and, I've got to either look at crowdfunding more, or potentially looking at some investment is probably the realistic thing. I've got 2 sites in waiting, so to try and look at setting them up by the end of next year, or maybe the end of this year, who knows. And yeah, just looking at training people as well, and educating people on the power of composting in terms of waste management and reduction, but also the regenerative potential of the compost if you're doing it right, and the microorganisms cycling nutrients in the soil. Because I can only do so much as me, so it's kind of getting other people involved and becoming much more open and collaborative and outward thinking, and kind of looking at other people setting these up where they are. You know, I can't do everybody's composting, but you know, the more we can get on board, the more that can happen everywhere. Yeah, well, I'm pretty hopeful. I think it's the future. I mean, there's some amazing examples. I mean, if you look at what's happened with companies like Riverford, where they've kind of transferred some of the ownership to the workers, and you see you know, for me, it's much more beneficial to motivate your staff with being invested in what you're doing, rather than, you know, the traditional more kind of control and shareholder thing. yeah, for me, it's the future. And the thing is, with mechanization coming the way it has and the way it seems to be coming forward, I think we've got to put, as I said earlier, those permaculture principles of people care in there as well. You know, people gotta have purpose. So like a purpose-driven job, you know, it gives people that incentive. But also, if we can, you know, financially look to support everybody in an organization rather than this kind of top-down thing. And being in Brighton, it's kind of a bit of a bubble for me. So for me, I kind of see it happening quite a lot, and you know, you've got living wage happening quite a lot here, and all of this stuff. So I guess my view, it may be warped by being in this little bubble, but for me, I'm very optimistic about it, and I'm seeing in starting to do things like I'm involved in a couple of, like, a Good Business Club and the Brighton Chamber of Commerce, and the people that are talking at these things, these events that they do, it's all very encouraging. And the new people that are coming on board, I mean, I'm very new in those as well. So for me, I'm very hopeful, and it's the future for me, I think. It's wonderful. I mean, it's unexpected. I mean, I feel like I'm relatively early in this journey, but it feels like important work. So any recognition is wonderful, and yeah, it feels. I mean, often people are saying to, I'm not a religious man, but often people say to me, "Oh, you're doing God's work." It's just, yeah, it's really important, I think, to kind of get the message. I think it can help amplify the message and get it out there to more people. So in any way that can happen, it's only good. You know, and the more positivity in the world at the moment, particularly, the better. So yeah, it's just beautiful. Thank you very much.